Well, for more on Sierra Leone's economic outlook, let's bring in Vickie Remoe, a freelance journalist from Freetown. So, which economic issues are the top priorities for voters this year?
I think the top priority for voters this year is job creation. What we've seen happen over the last 5 years is broken promises. We had a lot of investors that came in the 2012, right after the 2012 election, and because the iron ore prices dipped globally, all of them have folded up. So people are wondering, where are the jobs? You have 800,000 youth unemployed in Sierra Leone, and that's about a third. Youth are about a third of the population. When you have 800,000 young people unemployed in a post-conflict country, that's reason for concern.
So as you mentioned, and according to the United Nations, about 70% of youth are underemployed or unemployed. So how is this being addressed, and what still needs to be done?
I found that most of the candidates didn't really have much to say by way of employment. They seem to think that the answer for employment is private sector investment and bringing in big investment. But what we've seen is that that's not sustainable, because depending on how the global markets go, investors do leave. Most of 75% of all employed Sierra Leoneans work in the agricultural sector, but most youth don't necessarily want to work in agriculture. So the government really, whoever comes in next and this current government, it's still a challenge, and it's going to continue to be an issue. How do you find jobs for people who are going to college and oftentimes graduating without skills, and the rest of the population who are not even educated, have no skills, and can't find jobs?
Now, we know that Sierra Leone has overcome a number of years of economic crisis. You have the civil war that ended in 2002, and then the double shock of the Ebola epidemic and the commodity slump. So how would you characterize the overall state of the economy as it stands now?
Sorry, say that again?
Talking about some of the things that Sierra Leone has had to overcome, the civil war, which ended in 2002, the Ebola epidemic, the commodity slump, where do things stand currently with the economy?
Where we stand currently is that our economy has shrunken. Sierra Leone is on its way to becoming a heavily indebted country, because the government's policy as of right now is to borrow, borrow, and borrow. Last week, the president launched a $318 million airport project that's being funded by a Chinese bank and built by a Chinese construction company. They're hoping that that project will bring in some 30,000 jobs. However, most of the people here in Sierra Leone are very skeptical of that project, because the IMF and the World Bank had actually red-lighted it, and they didn't think that spending a third of your GDP on building an airport at a time when tourists and travel to Sierra Leone is an all-time low, where are these travelers going to come from? So basically, the government is doing what it thinks is best, which is to land and build these big projects, infrastructural development projects. They've decided to do a big bridge from the city to the airport. But again, voters are wondering, how is this going to actually bring long-term jobs? Because yes, you build an airport, it takes 4 years. Most of it is being built by foreign talent and foreign resources. What about locals? What about local entrepreneurs? What about small business empowerment? That's where voters want to see investment, and that's where the government doesn't seem to have a lot of ideas.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your insights. Journalist Vickie Remoe there.